In earlier videos, I talked about how there are 3 main kinds of knots and their position on the cord determines place value. But that's not the whole story. Of course, we've already seen that knots that don't have a set place on the cord could indicate narrative Khipus. Also in the Khipus, we looked at banding, and the Khipu expert explained that each pendant was long enough to accommodate 2 numbers. The knot closest to the primary cord represented what was completed, while the lower portion determined what was still owed. So in this case, place on the cord does not indicate numerical place value. In a modern Khipu studied by Mackey, a long knot was used to separate 2 totals on a cord. In the Kutusuma Khipu, which we discussed with twist and ply, instead of a knot's position on the pendant cord, numerical place value is shown in the size of the knot. Large knots were meant to mean hundreds place, medium knots for tens place, and the small knots were the ones place. Some Khipus have long knots in the tens place and simple knots in the ones place, which is opposite of what was introduced at the beginning of this video series. And some Khipus use only simple knots, even in the ones place. I've tried to choose pretty straightforward examples of Khipus for this video series, which may have made the Khipus look like an easier study than they actually are. Although the Khipus presented so far are frozen in time, many Khipus were used as living documents that were adjusted and updated over time. For example, in Tupikocha, those Khipus, knots were added and removed at certain times as part of local accounting practices. For example, if a family owed 3 days of labor, this was shown on the cord. Once the labor was performed, the knot could be undone to show that the debt was paid. Adjusting the knots like this is not unique to the Tupikocha Khipus. There are Khipus in the Open Khipu repository that had knots undone. This series has only focused on 3 kinds of knots, but that is an incomplete view of Khipus. Just to give an idea of the relative frequency of the Khipus, of the different kinds of knots, there are 110,677 knots recorded in the Open Khipu repository database. Here's how many there are of each. In Wari Khipus, simple overhand knots are used, as well as double overhand knots and triple overhand knots. They don't use long knots or figure-8 knots. Overhand knots can also be wrapped or have a colored thread added. The patrimonial Tupikocha Khipus feature 3 distinct, more intricate long knots not observed in any of the archaeological Khipus, including one that is similar to a variant of the monkey's fist stopper knot. It is theorized that the Tupikocha knot was used for items distributed, while the Inca-style knot was used for items stored. In modern Khipus, sometimes a loop is used instead of the simple knot traditionally in the tens place to signify the number 10, and in one modern Khipu, 10 knots are used to mean 100 instead of a single knot at a higher place value. Some modern Khipus also have objects tied into the knots. In this slide, from a talk by Jeffrey Splitstoser, you can see that different knots were used at different times in history. In the next video, we'll look at other ways the Khipus have evolved across different time periods.